Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Very excited today. We have Adeline Tiah with us from Singapore. So Adeline, thank you so much for joining us today. It's excited to have you here.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. We're excited to learn more about your book and all the work that you're doing. And I do want to take just a moment and thank our audience for joining us. Super grateful to have you picking Women in Leadership Talk as your podcast to go to. We're now being listened to in 23 countries, so that gets us really excited and gives us an opportunity to showcase amazing women like Adeline on our show today. So Adeline, let me just share with our audience a little bit of your background before we jump into some questions. So Adeline she is an accomplished Chief Marketing Officer with more than 20 years experience across top banks, telco, and startups. She's passionate about building brands and high performance teams. Having worked for both corporate as well as startups in which she helped grow the business from 0 to 1 and scale from 10 to 100, she understands the organizational health is instrumental in business success. The leadership and employees' mindset determine an organization's health, and a mindset of agility and growth will be a competitive advantage for any business in a highly disruptive world. Her career journey and experience from coaching over 250 clients has provided insights on why we need to embrace a permanent reinvention mindset to thrive in an uncertain world. Her latest book, Reinvent 4.0, The Keys to Unlock Success and Thrive in Uncertainty, is inspired by her own successes and experiences. The key takeaways from her book is to invest in your next trajectory while you're still growing. So, Adeline, super excited to talk more about Reinvent 4.0. And, just even in your bio, some of the themes that come up about complexities and, some of the challenges that organizations face, I think it's really timely that we're having this conversation and to talk about uncertainty. Maybe share with us a little bit about your background and more of what prompted you to write Reinvent 4.0.
Well, I actually have been a marketer most part of my career. And in the last couple of years, I began my coaching journey as part of my leadership development as I moved to a business role. And when I took a career break a couple of years ago and I started coaching people, and that gave me a lot of inspirations of my book. So last year, I decided to take a bold move to write a book which shares insights of the clients I've coached, right? And this book, Reinvent 4.0, is about the future of work. How people need to shift their mindset. And when I launched the book, it was just so timely because at that time we had so many disruptions that's happening in the world with layoffs, with people looking at especially post-COVID, right? What's next for me? Reflecting on the larger purpose. So it's just timely that I take time out to write. And writing has always been, being an author has always been my childhood dream.
Oh, very good. Okay, so you're bringing your dreams to fruition, which is beautiful, and you're sharing some of your experiences. So, what exactly is Reinvent 4.0, and who's the book dedicated to?
Well, Reinvent, when I started out, it was meant to be not just a destination. A lot of people talk about reinventing themselves, moving from one role to another, like pivoting, right? But to me, it's more than that. It is a journey of versions, multiple versions upgrades, just like what we have always been used to, right? Mobile phones upgrade different versions, improving ourselves along the way as we grow in our career. And as we do so, we upskill ourselves and we evolved to become to different roles, or to something very different. So when I wrote the book, it was meant for individuals, but it also applies to leaders as well. Especially in this context where business are shifting, being disrupted, leaders need to embrace the reinvent mindset to be able to lead the organization forward to the future. And even we talk about reinvention, organizations are reinventing themselves.
Of course, they have to, right? We've got so many complexities in the world right now. If you stay stagnant, you will die. You will not survive in the world.
Yes, absolutely. So that's why the theme applies across to all individuals, leaders, as well as organizations.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. Well, let's get into some of the themes, because I mean, one of the things that you talk about is this shocking truth about the future of companies. And so when you've gone through your research for your book, what are some of the themes that you've discovered and that we need to know about?
Right. So as we know, success breeds complexity because we are so used to enjoying the success. We leaders are today mainly focused on current challenges and forget about the race for tomorrow because, with how things have evolved. And therefore, before they know it, businesses are disrupted. For consumer company, it is about understanding that consumers are evolving. So good examples out there, right? How Netflix disrupted Blockbuster. Because Blockbuster, did not look at consumers' needs because consumers are now, looking at that time, looking at how can we bring streaming to their homes and videos on demand. So Netflix solved the problem, and digital technology actually enabled that. Yeah. And the same for Fuji and Kodak story, the Fujifilm and Kodak story. Again, this shows that Fujifilm was constantly evolving. When Sony launched the digital camera in the 1980s, they saw the opportunity and they started building more digital labs. And by the early 2000s, right? Fujifilm had 4,000 digital studios in the US, and Kodak only has 100. Yeah. And they were ready for the new wave of trend, right? But there was not enough, because they realized that when they're processing the digital films, they used nanotechnology and collagen as some of the ingredients of processing the films. And therefore, they saw an opportunity and they invested using the same products, and they invest in developing a new product revenue streams. That is, they launched the high-end cosmetic products, Esther Lift, and by 2013, right? Actually, the cosmetic and the healthcare business unit actually contributes to 20% of Fujifilm's total revenue.
Oh, wow. And I did not realize that.
Yeah. And that goes to show that, one of my takeaways from my book is about investing in your next trajectory while you're still growing and not being complacent.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a powerful message in so many ways, because that applies to, the product that you're selling. It also applies to the people that are working with you, making that investment in them so that they're ready for those next challenges and that they're ready for that disruption. So, I think it's important for us to talk about what are some of those insights to stay ahead of this curve, and how do we go about navigating the changes that we're facing?
I would say agility. We have always been so used to the phrase change is constant, right? But when you look at it, change is no longer constant. It is exponential. Yeah. You see it coming a lot faster, and a paradox of it is that we are not even aware of it. So agility, would be the key theme. And I would break it down into 8 key traits. Actually, my book, Reinvent, is an acronym. R stands for risk-taking mindset. Okay. E is entrepreneurial thinking. I is inclusiveness, because we talk about multi-generational workforce, right? We need to harness diversity. And N stands for noticeable, which is personal branding, placing yourself out there. And V is vulnerable, being authentic to yourself. And E is empathy. N for networking. And T for transdisciplinary learning. And these 8 traits just happens to string together and form the word reinvent, which is why I mentioned earlier that reinvent is actually a journey of versions upgrades rather than pivot.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, you hit on so many things, because I happen to be a huge fan of transdisciplinary, and I'm actually doing my PhD in transdisciplinary studies. And so I love that, that's what your T stands for, because it's a different way of even thinking and being, right? And not getting caught up in, a specific end result, but looking at all the many ways that you can look at a situation. So I love that. So what do you believe? Because you talked about some of the skills that are going to be necessary for next generation or for all of us to continue to rapidly, increase our knowledge, increase our skill set based on this changing world that we're living in. What does that look like?
I would say the very important thing is to be able to think like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
In the past, when employees, right, look for jobs, we always look at job description. I mean, it's important. The job description gives you an idea of what the scope of work is, but you should always approach your opportunity, whether as a leader or as an individual, you should approach it like an entrepreneur. What is the problem out there? How can I solve the problem? And with the skill sets that you have, how can you solve the problem? Which is why it goes back to transdisciplinary as well. You do not want to pigeonhole yourself to a job role, but you look at what skill sets you have. Obviously, you need to have a genius skill, right? A skill that you excel in. But along the way, you build transdisciplinary skills from different domains. Yeah. And it happens to me, right? Because I have always been a marketer. When I decided to, hey, let's try something, learn something different along the way, I got myself certified as a coach. It helps me in having conversations with my stakeholders. It helps me better as a leader, the way I lead. And it goes back to my main role as well, right? And along the way, I also got myself certified as a human-centered design practitioner.
Oh,
and
nice.
human-centered design thinking, right? It's about solving problems. It's about driving innovation. And when I bring that back to my work, I realize that it helps me in solving problems. Mm-hmm. And all these so-called reboots that I have for myself along the way in my career actually widen my perspectives. It helps me build new network as well as I learn new skills. Yeah. And it has really enriched my, my thinking. And again, it brings back value to where I am working in, whether I am entrepreneur or whether I work for an organization.
I love it. I love it. And so why do you think so often people stop growing, right? Like I have to go there with you today because I love, what you're sharing about how hungry you are to learn and to solve problems and looking at it from different lenses. But so often you will find people who they get into this place and they get comfortable and stay there. So why do you think that happens?
I suppose comfort zone, complacency. I've seen friends who have been in the same organization for 20 years. Well, they have rose to the rank. But as they rise to the rank, they are just in the same industry, same organization. Over time, they are an expensive project coordinator, right? They fail to disrupt themselves. So I actually learned that earlier stage in my career. I was in the telco industry for about 9 years. Okay. And I got a call from a recruiter to go to a banking industry. I resisted for it. I resisted it for a couple of years. I said, no, I enjoy myself. I love what I do. But something that she said stuck with me, right? Say, if I'm going to stay in the same organization for so many years, I'm going to be a fixed asset. And wow. I decided to disrupt myself and join. It was a bold move. I joined a new industry, adapting to a new environment, different culture. First 6 months was tough, but the next thing I knew, I was there in the same industry, in the finance industry for 12 years. Wow. Right. And it's about over time, I realized that being able to deal with discomfort, being comfortable with being uncomfortable is actually a good thing because you constantly stretch yourself and you grow as a result of it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's so important because we do get comfortable, right? And we stop growing. And it's when you're in that uncomfortable state that you really do learn, and you learn about yourself, but you also stretch yourself to take on more. And you start to realize how you're not hitting your full potential, right? When you're in your comfort zone, you can't. So you got to have that disruption. I love it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, one of the things that I think is really important, especially in the work that you're doing, is thinking about what those skills that are going to be necessary for our kids and how do we teach that now so that this next generation, they're ahead of where we were, right? And then how do we impact the systems? Because we have systems that sort of keep us in a certain flow of learning, let's say, how do we start to disrupt some of that, Adeline, and help our kids become, better in this next generation?
I think I would say being able to take risk,
Yeah.
learning to take risk, and it's okay to fail. We learn the best from failures, right? There's no such thing as failures. And, we learn from, it's only learning experience. That's how I always frame. I think the ability to frame situations is important. We should teach our children that. And although systems and structures are important because it gives you the cadence, right? It gives you a certain way of thinking, but we need to be able to take risk, and also learn curiosity, right? Being able to always learning and building your network, even when you're young age. Like I for example, my son is in university now. Earlier on in his younger years, I always teach him it's okay to fail. As a parent, I provide a safety net. So whenever he failed his exams, I just make sure that I, comfort him and say that it's okay. That's not the end of the world. And I would get him to write a reflection letter. It's part of like coaching, right? I like him to write the reflection letter and say, what is it that you have done well? What is it that you have not done well that caused you to fail in the exam?
Yeah.
And what would you do next? So he write on it his own reflection, and I sign it off. And of course, I supported him, right, with tuition and giving him the space to learn. And before I knew it, he actually was getting A's in his school in the next term. And that actually drive his intrinsic motivation, because he realized that actually I can do it.
That's awesome.
So I think bottom line is being able to embrace failure. It's okay to fail. Take strategic risk when you know that you have failed and you can do well. You kind of begin to be able to take risk.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. And we, as a society, I think we teach that failure is not good. And I'm totally in your camp. I think that it's important that it's not about the failing, it's about what you learn from it. So if you reflect on your own life, you've had some incredible experiences. What would be like one big risk that you took that you were like, I don't know if I'm gonna succeed or fail? What would be an example that you could share with us?
Well, I have taken many risks. I realized after I wrote the book, I connect back the dots, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just share two pivotal moments. Many years ago, I had two job opportunities. One was a global bank, Citibank.
Okay.
Everybody would love to be in a global bank. 20 years ago, that was the brand name that would actually looks good on their CV. But I took a risk. I joined a telco startup, which was not even launched. There was no brand name to it. But Singapore at that time only had one telco operator that was incumbent. And I thought that, hey, how often do you get a chance to disrupt an industry?
Oh, I love it.
I decided to take the risk. I joined a telco startup. I was richly and I'm blessed because over the 9 years, I took on different roles. I grew within the organization. I get to pick up new skills, win marketing awards, and that put me, give me the opportunities to speak at marketing events as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was one risk I took. And many years down the road, I took a risk to join a totally new industry, right? Banking is a very established industry. It's got a culture that is already very fixed. I don't get to build the culture, so I had to adapt to it.
Sure.
So I wasn't sure whether I was going to succeed. I adapted, like I said, being uncomfortable. And then 10 years down the road, I actually took another risk. I left a job without a job. And it was scary because I've never done that before, right? And I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to get back to work. I was in my 40s. That was when I decided, okay, I have to really disrupt myself before I get disrupted. And when I did that, I realized that no matter how high I climbed in the corporate ladder, I was just a frog in a well, because my perspective was just restricted to my industry, to what I know. And during the 2 years career break, I was actively seeking out new communities. I was learning new skills. And when I get back to work, obviously I had a bit of challenges because employers felt that, hey, you were off work for 2 years. How updated are you in industry trends? But on the contrary, I was actually ahead of them because I was actually, building my network in the startup community, learning new skills, getting myself certified as a coach, talking to people on the ground, learning what's out there. And actually, when I came back, I eventually joined a startup, a fintech. And at that time, right, that was like 4 years ago, fintech was the in thing. And joining a fintech was also taking a risk because they were, and the fintech funds can run out, right? So again, I took a risk. And new industry, I get into the world of agile methodology. I learn new skills again, and there's no turning back.
Yeah, love that, love that. So what I hear is it's this constant upgrading, this constant learning, putting yourself in situations where you get curious about, new trends potentially, or just putting yourself into situations where you're meeting people even who might be working in, different industries than what you've been in, which helps you then navigate. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely
awesome. Beautiful. So, complexities and change are really two of the most, I would say they're the biggest obstacles for most people. So how does one stay calm during all of this change and complexity and really foolproof their future? What would be your thoughts on that?
I would say faith. Faith in whatever religion you have in, and courage, right? The courage, and they go together, right? The courage knowing that things will turn out fine, and take a strategic risk. When I talk about taking risk, is about calculated risk, because I am risk adverse actually. How do you take the strategic risk knowing what is the opportunity trade-off? So it takes courage to do that.
It does, indeed. It does. Part of that, what I just took from what you said, part of that is also trusting yourself, right? Like really trusting that things will work out and that you're taking a strategic risk to better yourself, to better whatever it is that you're working on. So I love that. That's great. So I'm cognizant of our time. So just a couple more questions. So why do leaders and organizations need Reinvent 4.0? Why is that important for people to embrace and really implement Reinvent?
Well, as I shared earlier, change is no longer constant, it's exponential. And it's important that organizations and leaders are agile, right? The whole idea about reinventing is being agile, and just like mobile apps, we have versions upgrade. So organizations need to not just focus on dealing with current challenges, they need to be, what do you call that, embrace the ambidextrous, and to be able to invest in their future as well. Just give an example, right? We often think of how do we improve ourselves. That's a present forward thinking, and it's incremental. You can only see what's within your sight. But another approach of looking at it, reinventing yourself, is future back thinking, right? Looking at 20 years ahead. Where do you want your businesses to be? Just like as an individual, right? I had somebody ask me, what would an 80-year-old Adeline thank me for what I do today? 80-year-old, I'm not there yet. So it's really about projecting and reimagining where you want to be, where your businesses want to be, and then work backward. What do you need to do now to get there? And it's the same thing as well. Like, for example, Apple, right? When Steve Jobs started building his mobile phone, right? He did not think of improving on Nokia phone or Motorola. It would be incremental. He looks at it as his vision, right? What does he want to change people's life, right? He wants to digitalize, enable people's life digitally. And therefore, we have a phone now. Today, it is our alarm clock. It is our weather reporter. It also helps us to be our calendar, to check on our schedule, more than just a mobile phone.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I never even thought about it that way. That's a really, really important aspect of what do you want to be long term instead of just going through the motions every day. Love that. That's a great share. And what might be one other thing that you would want to share, Adeline, today that people could walk away with and implement to really help them embrace and accelerate the changing times that we're in?
I would say invest in the next trajectory while you're still growing. It's just like organizations, right? Don't just focus on your current challenges. Think ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're working for an organization who doesn't think ahead, either you really push that, invest in yourself, because I think some of the highlights of what you've pulled out today is the importance of taking ownership of your own trajectory, and making sure that you are staying top of mind for that learning, that development, that growth, and putting yourself in experiences where you're exposed to lots of different things.
Yes, absolutely. I think we need to be able to be prepared to disrupt ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. And we don't do that nearly enough.
Yes, and let's go back to being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and as you were saying that earlier, I think about my own journey and experiences. And, after being out of school for 30 some years, I went back to school, and people are like, why are you doing that? And I'm doing a PhD in transdisciplinary. And it's like, because it's pushing me to grow and to look at things differently, right? And to not think that things are all very linear, but how much more there is available to us if we can just open ourselves to it.
Yes, absolutely. It's growth mindset.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love it. Wow. This has been terrific. Thank you so much for joining us today. You really have pushed yourself to embrace those changes and the complexities, and you're finding ways to navigate that. And I love it. So inspirational. So thank you for joining us and sharing all that you're doing.
Thanks, Vicky. I think it was great conversation. I just enjoyed this as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And I want to thank our audience. Thank you guys for showing up today and listening to the podcast with Adeline. And please connect with her on LinkedIn. Are there other places, Adeline, that they can reach you? Are you on Instagram or Facebook?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. You can also check out my book on Amazon as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So if you have questions, reach out to Adeline on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I heard you on the WIL Talk podcast. Ask her questions about some of the things that we've talked about today. I'm sure she'd be happy to respond to you. And that'll give her a clue as to how you know about her. And please do go on Amazon and order her book so that you can look at how do you start to reinvent yourself, and be a disruptor for you. So we want to thank you. And if you're curious about your own leadership style, you can always go on to the WIL Empowered website, which is 1L, and take our free leadership quiz, because that'll help you have insight as to how you're showing up as a leader. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next podcast. Take care, everyone.